Draw something, little artist. Millionaire Richard Coleman's voice rose with mockery as he extended the paper and pencil toward 8-year-old Marcus. The other executives in his office began to snicker. Let's see those talented hands of yours. But when Marcus took the pencil in his hand, everyone in the room held their breath. That first line would mark the beginning of the most shocking moment Richard had witnessed in his 40-year business career. Richard Coleman had built his empire from nothing. At 45, he owned Coleman Industries, a construction company worth $300 million. His corner office on the 40th floor of downtown Manhattan overlooked the city like a throne room, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows and imported Italian leather furniture. But success had made Richard arrogant. He believed money was the ultimate measure of worth, and anyone without it simply didn't deserve his respect. Sarah Williams had been cleaning Richard's office for 3 years. A single mother of 2, she worked 2 jobs to support her children. At 34, she moved through the corporate world invisible to most executives, just another face in the cleaning crew. Today was different. Sarah's regular babysitter had called in sick, and she had no choice but to bring her 8-year-old son Marcus to work. She had hoped no one would notice the quiet boy sitting in the corner of the break room. What is that doing here? Richard's sharp voice cut through the morning air as he spotted Marcus through his office's glass wall. Sarah rushed over, her cleaning supplies clattering. I'm so sorry, Mr. Coleman. My sitter got sick and I couldn't find anyone else. He won't be any trouble, I promise. Richard's eyes narrowed. This is a professional environment, not a daycare center. Marcus looked up from his coloring book, his dark eyes meeting Richard's cold stare without flinching. The 8-year-old had inherited his mother's quiet dignity, but there was something else in those eyes, an intelligence that didn't belong in such a young face. Please, Mr. Coleman, Sarah begged. Just for today. I'll make sure he stays out of your way.
Richard was about to refuse when an idea struck him. His business associates were arriving for their monthly meeting in an hour. Men who prided themselves on their sophistication and success. What better entertainment than to humiliate this woman and her child in front of them?
Actually, Richard said, his lips curving into a cruel smile, let him stay. In fact, bring him to my office when my guests arrive. I think they'd be amused. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but she nodded. She needed this job. An hour later, Richard's office was filled with 5 of the city's most successful businessmen. There was Thomas Mitchell from Mitchell Banking, William Hayes from Hayes Real Estate, Robert Chun from Chun Tech, David Foster from Foster Investments, and Marcus Turner from Turner Corporation. These men controlled billions of dollars and thousands of jobs. They were used to being treated with deference and respect everywhere they went. Gentlemen, Richard announced, pouring expensive scotch into crystal glasses, I have some special entertainment for you today. He called Sarah over. Bring the boy. Sarah appeared with Marcus, who looked small and out of place among the towering executives in their $1,000 suits. The child clutched a worn sketchbook against his chest. This is Marcus, Richard said theatrically, the son of our cleaning staff. I thought you might enjoy seeing some local talent. The executives chuckled, understanding the cruel game Richard was playing. Tell me, Marcus, Richard continued, his voice dripping with false kindness. Do you like to draw? Marcus nodded silently. Wonderful! Richard clapped his hands together. Gentlemen, we have ourselves an artist. Thomas Mitchell leaned forward, grinning. This should be interesting. William Hayes whispered to Robert Chun. Richard always knows how to liven up a meeting. Sarah stood frozen, realizing too late what her boss intended to do. She wanted to protect her son, but speaking up would mean losing her job, and she couldn't afford that. Richard walked to his mahogany desk and pulled out an expensive sheet of paper and a silver-plated mechanical pencil. Now, Marcus, he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. I want you to draw something special for us. Something that shows us your artistic vision. The executives positioned themselves around the room like spectators at a cruel sport. David Foster had his phone ready, probably planning to record the humiliation for later entertainment. What should he draw, gentlemen? Richard asked his audience. How about a house? Suggested Marcus Turner with a smirk. Something ambitious. Or better yet, added Thomas Mitchell, let's see him draw success. Something he'll probably never understand. The laughter that filled the room was cold and heartless. Marcus stood perfectly still throughout this exchange, his small hands gripping his sketchbook. His mother watched helplessly from the corner, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "I have a better idea," Richard announced. "Marcus, I want you to draw a portrait of me." This brought fresh waves of laughter from the group. "A portrait of greatness," William Hayes chimed in. "Let's see if he can capture true achievement." Richard positioned himself dramatically by the window, his silhouette against the Manhattan skyline. "This will be my new office portrait," he declared mockingly. "Draw something, little artist." Richard's voice rose with mockery as he extended the paper and pencil toward Marcus. The other executives snickered. "Let's see those talented hands of yours." Marcus looked at the expensive paper and silver pencil Richard offered, then quietly shook his head. Instead, he opened his worn sketchbook and pulled out his own regular pencil. A simple wooden one, worn down from use. "Oh, he prefers his own supplies," Robert Chun laughed. "How authentic," Richard shrugged. "Fine, use whatever you want. The result will be the same." What none of these men knew was that Marcus had been drawing since he was 3 years old. While other children played video games, he sketched everything around him. While they watched cartoons, he studied faces, capturing expressions and emotions with startling accuracy. His talent wasn't just natural ability, it was the result of countless hours of practice, fueled by a passion that burned bright despite his circumstances. Sarah knew her son's gift, but she had never told anyone at work. In their world, such things seemed irrelevant. Who would care about the artistic ability of a cleaning lady's child? Marcus looked up at Richard, studying his face with an intensity that made the businessman slightly uncomfortable. The child's eyes moved over every detail. The arrogant set of the jaw, the cold calculation in the eyes, the way Richard held himself like he owned the world. Then Marcus began to draw. The first line appeared on the paper. The snickering stopped. Marcus's pencil moved across the page with confidence and precision that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old. His strokes were deliberate, controlled, masterful. Within moments, Richard's face began to emerge on the paper, but this wasn't a child's simple cartoon. This was sophisticated portraiture that captured not just physical features, but personality, character, even soul. Thomas Mitchell leaned closer, his smug expression fading. Is he really doing that? The portrait was taking shape with stunning accuracy. Every line was exactly where it should be. The proportions were perfect. The shading showed depth and understanding of light that art students struggle to master. But Marcus wasn't just drawing Richard's face. He was revealing something deeper. The eyes in the portrait held cruelty. The mouth showed arrogance. The overall expression captured the exact moment of mockery, but from the perspective of someone seeing through the facade of success to the ugly reality beneath. "My God," whispered William Hayes, "he's actually—" Robert Chun couldn't finish his sentence. The child was creating art that would hang in galleries. David Foster slowly lowered his phone, no longer interested in recording humiliation. He was witnessing something extraordinary. Marcus worked in complete silence, occasionally glancing up at Richard to capture a detail, then returning to his work with laser focus. His small hand moved with the confidence of a master artist. Sarah watched from the corner, tears now flowing freely. But these weren't tears of shame. They were tears of pride mixed with heartbreak. Pride in her son's incredible gift, and heartbreak that it took this cruel moment for anyone to see it. As Marcus continued drawing, the room fell into complete silence. The executives who had come for entertainment found themselves witnessing something that challenged everything they believed about talent, worth, and where greatness could be found. The portrait was nearly complete now, and it was undeniably masterful. But there was something else emerging in the drawing, something that made Richard increasingly uncomfortable. Marcus had captured not just his physical appearance, but his character. The portrait showed a man whose success had made him hollow, whose wealth had replaced his humanity, whose power had corrupted his soul. It was brutally honest. "How is he doing this?" Marcus Turner whispered to David Foster. "I don't know," David replied, unable to look away. "I've never seen anything like it." Thomas Mitchell, who had been ready to mock a child's simple drawing, found himself studying a work of art that surpassed anything in his expensive collection. The technique was flawless. The artistic vision was profound. The execution was that of someone who understood not just how to draw, but how to reveal truth through art. But Marcus wasn't finished. With careful, deliberate strokes, he began adding something to the background of the portrait. At first, it wasn't clear what he was drawing. Then the image became recognizable. He was drawing the office around Richard, but showing it from a different perspective. The expensive furniture looked cold and lifeless. The city view through the window seemed distant and meaningless. The whole environment spoke of isolation despite success, emptiness despite wealth. He's showing... Robert Chun started, then stopped, unable to articulate what he was seeing. He's showing who you really are, Sarah said quietly from the corner. It was the first time she had spoken since bringing Marcus into the room, and her voice carried a dignity that had been absent from every other interaction these men had witnessed. Richard stared at the drawing, and for the first time in years, he saw himself clearly. The child had captured not just his appearance, but his essence, and it wasn't flattering. The arrogance that Richard wore like armor looked ugly in the portrait. The contempt he showed for people he considered beneath him was evident in every line. The emptiness behind his success was revealed with devastating clarity. This is ... double quotes William Hayes began, then stopped. This is extraordinary, Thomas Mitchell finished, his voice filled with awe. Marcus set down his pencil and looked up at the room full of adults. They were all staring at him with expressions he had never seen before. Not mockery, not dismissal, but respect. Where did you learn to draw like this? David Foster asked, his tone completely changed from minutes earlier. I taught myself, Marcus said simply. I draw every day. Every day? Robert Chun knelt down to Marcus's eye level. For how long? Since I was little, Marcus replied. I like to see things the way they really are. The weight of that statement hung in the air. Richard looked around the room at his associates, expecting to see their usual support for his cruel entertainment. Instead, he saw men who were questioning everything they thought they knew. Richard, Marcus Turner said slowly, do you realize what just happened here? Child drew a picture, Richard replied, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. No, Thomas Mitchell corrected. A prodigy just created a masterpiece in your office while you were mocking him. The truth of the situation was sinking in. These successful businessmen who prided themselves on recognizing talent and opportunity had almost missed witnessing something incredible because of their preconceptions. Sarah stepped forward, no longer willing to remain silent. Marcus has been drawing since he was 3, she said, her voice steady despite years of being treated as invisible. He's never had formal training, never had expensive supplies, never had anyone believe in his gift except me. She looked directly at Richard. But he draws every day. He studies art books from the library. He practices constantly because he loves it. The executives looked at the portrait again, seeing it with new understanding. This wasn't just talent. This was dedication, passion, and natural ability combined into something remarkable. He's been sitting in that break room for 3 years, Sarah continued, drawing while I work. And not one of you ever noticed. Not one of you ever asked what he was doing. The accusation hung heavy in the air. David Foster spoke first. Sarah, we owe you and Marcus an apology. You owe him more than that, she replied. You owe him the respect you would give any artist of this caliber. Marcus had been listening to this exchange quietly, still holding his pencil. Now he spoke up. It's okay, Mom. They didn't know. The simple forgiveness in his voice made the situation even more powerful. This child, who had just been humiliated by grown men, was showing them grace they didn't deserve. Richard stared at the portrait, unable to deny what he was seeing. The drawing was professionally executed, emotionally powerful, and uncomfortably accurate. It was the work of someone with genuine artistic gift. But more than that, it forced him to confront who he had become. Robert Chun pulled out his phone, but not to record mockery. He was looking up something. Marcus, he said, have you ever heard of the Manhattan Youth Art Academy? Marcus shook his head. It's one of the most prestigious art schools in the country. They have a scholarship program for gifted children. He showed Marcus pictures on his phone, studios filled with easels, students creating beautiful artwork, teachers helping young artists develop their skills. I sit on their board, Robert continued. I think they need to see your work. William Hayes stepped forward. I collect art, Marcus. I have pieces by famous artists in my home. But I've never seen anything quite like what you just created. Thomas Mitchell nodded in agreement. The emotional depth, the technical skill, it's remarkable for any age, let alone 8 years old. Marcus looked at his mother, confusion in his eyes. These were the same men who had been laughing at him minutes earlier. What changed? He asked innocently. David Foster knelt down beside him. We saw your talent, and it made us realize how wrong we were. How wrong we've been about many things. Marcus Turner looked at Richard, who had remained silent through this exchange. Richard, he said, I think you need to see something. He opened his briefcase and pulled out his tablet, quickly searching for something online. Here, he said, showing the screen to the group. These are drawings by child prodigies throughout history. Picasso at age 8, Michelangelo's early sketches. Look at the comparisons. The similarities were undeniable. Marcus's work showed the same intuitive understanding of form, the same emotional depth, the same technical precision that marked true artistic genius. Richard stared at the evidence, unable to deny what everyone could see. He had just witnessed something extraordinary, and his first instinct had been to mock it. He began, then stopped. For 45 years, Richard Coleman had measured worth by wealth, success by money, value by material possessions. He had built his entire worldview around the belief that those with less money were inherently less valuable. But this child, whose mother cleaned his office for minimum wage, had just demonstrated a gift that money couldn't buy, talent that couldn't be purchased, genius that couldn't be earned through wealth. Sarah, he said finally, his voice different now, I owe you and Marcus a profound apology. Sarah watched him carefully, unsure if this was genuine or another game. More than an apology, Richard continued, I owe you respect. And Marcus, you have a gift that I couldn't recognize because I was blinded by my own prejudices. Marcus looked up at him with those intelligent eyes. It's okay, Mr. Coleman. My mom says people sometimes act mean when they're scared. Scared? Richard repeated, What would I be scared of? Maybe scared that you're not as important as you think you are, Marcus replied with devastating innocence. The truth of that statement hit Richard like a physical blow. This child had seen through him completely and captured that truth in his portrait. The other executives watched this exchange in fascination. They were witnessing something they had never seen before, Richard Coleman being humbled by an 8-year-old. Robert Chun spoke up. Marcus, would you be interested in taking art classes? Real classes with professional teachers? Marcus's eyes lit up for the first time since entering the office. Could I really do that? I think we can arrange something, Robert said, looking meaningfully at the other executives. Thomas Mitchell nodded. The Mitchell Foundation supports arts education. We could sponsor his enrollment. William Hayes added, and I know gallery owners who would be interested in seeing more of his work. David Foster pulled out his business card. I want to connect you with some people in the art world, people who understand talent when they see it. Marcus looked at all these offers with wonder, but then turned to his mother with concern. Mom, can we afford this? Sarah's heart broke and swelled simultaneously. Even in this moment of opportunity, her 8-year-old son was worried about money. These gentlemen are offering to help, she said carefully, still not entirely trusting the sudden change in attitude. Richard had been listening to these offers, watching this child's face light up with possibility. And he realized something profound. All his life, he had taken credit for recognizing talent, for spotting opportunities, for making smart investments. But when faced with genuine genius, his first instinct had been to destroy it. What did that say about who he really was? Wait, Richard said, causing everyone to turn toward him. He walked to his desk and pulled out his personal checkbook, not the company account, but his own private funds. Marcus, he said, I want to do something for you. Not because I have to, but because I need to. He wrote out a check and handed it to Sarah. Her eyes widened when she saw the amount. $50,000. This is for Marcus's education, Richard explained. Art classes, supplies, whatever he needs. And Sarah, I'm promoting you to head of facilities management, with a salary increase to match. Sarah stared at the check, tears flowing freely now. Mr. Coleman, why? Because your son just taught me something I should have learned years ago, Richard replied. Talent has nothing to do with wealth. Character has nothing to do with status. And I've been a fool for thinking otherwise. He looked at Marcus, who was watching this exchange with the same careful attention he had given to the portrait. Marcus, will you accept my apology? Will you let me help you develop your gift? Marcus considered this seriously, with the gravity of someone much older. Will you be nice to other people too? He asked. Not just me? The question caught Richard off guard. What do you mean? Will you be nice to the other cleaning people? And the security guards? And everyone else who used to be mean too? Richard looked around the room at the other executives, who were watching this exchange with fascination. An 8-year-old was negotiating not just for himself, but for everyone who had been treated poorly. "Yes," Richard said finally. "I promise to treat everyone with respect." Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the office. "Then okay. I accept your apology." 6 months later, Marcus was enrolled in the Manhattan Youth Art Academy, on a full scholarship funded jointly by all 5 businessmen who had witnessed his talent that day. His artwork was already being displayed in a prestigious gallery, with all proceeds going toward a scholarship fund for other disadvantaged children with artistic gifts. Sarah had moved into a management position, overseeing not just cleaning services but working conditions for all support staff in the building. Under her leadership, employee satisfaction had increased dramatically. But the most significant change was in Richard himself. The portrait Marcus had drawn still hung in his office, not as decoration, but as a daily reminder of who he had been and who he was trying to become. He had established the Coleman Foundation for Arts Education, dedicating millions of dollars to identifying and supporting young artists from underprivileged backgrounds. More importantly, he had changed how he treated everyone around him. The cruel entertainment was gone, replaced by genuine interest in the people who worked for him. "Mr. Coleman," his new assistant said, entering his office with the morning reports, "you have a visitor." Marcus walked in, carrying a large portfolio case. He was dressed in his academy uniform, looking confident and happy. "I brought you something," he said, opening his portfolio. Inside was a new portrait, but this one was completely different from the first. This Richard Coleman had kind eyes, a genuine smile, and an aura of someone who had found peace with himself. "This is how I see you now," Marcus explained. Richard looked at both portraits, the brutal honesty of the first, and the hopeful transformation of the second. "Thank you, Marcus," he said quietly, "for showing me both versions of myself." The story of Marcus's discovery spread throughout the business community, but not in the way Richard had expected. Instead of being mocked for being humbled by a child, Richard found himself respected for his willingness to change. Other executives began examining their own behavior, their own prejudices, their own missed opportunities to recognize talent. Thomas Mitchell started a mentorship program at his bank, connecting successful professionals with gifted children from disadvantaged backgrounds. William Hayes opened his art collection to public school groups, providing free educational tours that exposed children to great art who might never have seen it otherwise. Robert Chan used his technology company to develop apps that helped identify and nurture artistic talent in underserved communities. David Foster created investment funds specifically designed to support arts education and cultural programs. Marcus Turner established internship programs that gave opportunities to young people regardless of their family's financial situation. The mockery of one child had transformed into a movement that changed countless lives. 2 years after that transformative day, Richard received an invitation that brought tears to his eyes. Marcus Williams, Young Artist Showcase opening night at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. At age 10, Marcus had become the youngest artist ever to have a solo exhibition at one of the world's most prestigious museums. Richard arrived at the opening to find the gallery packed with art lovers, critics, collectors, and fellow artists. But in the center of it all was Marcus, still the same thoughtful, gracious child, now surrounded by people who recognized his extraordinary gift. Sarah stood nearby, radiant with pride, wearing an elegant dress that Richard had ensured she could afford with her new salary and benefits. "Mr. Coleman," Marcus called out, weaving through the crowd to reach him. "Hello, Marcus," Richard said, genuinely happy to see the boy. "Congratulations, this is incredible." "I want to show you something special," Marcus said, taking Richard's hand and leading him to a particular section of the exhibition. That prominently displayed were both portraits Marcus had drawn of Richard, the first brutal truth and the second hopeful transformation, side by side. The placard read, "Portrait of Change, a study in human transformation." "I wanted people to see that everyone can change," Marcus explained. "That the person we are isn't the person we have to stay." Richard stood before the portraits, remembering that day when his world had been turned upside down by a child's honesty. "You know what the most amazing part is?" Richard said to Marcus. "What? You've taught me that true wealth isn't money. It's recognizing the value in every person we meet. You've made me richer than I ever was before." Marcus smiled, the same innocent, wise smile that had forgiven a room full of cruel adults 2 years earlier. I think that's what art is supposed to do, he said. Show people things they couldn't see before. Today, 5 years after that transformative afternoon, the Marcus Williams Foundation for Young Artists provides scholarships and support to hundreds of gifted children from underprivileged backgrounds. Richard Coleman serves as its chairman, having discovered that using his wealth to nurture talent brings him more satisfaction than any business deal ever did. Sarah Williams became the foundation's executive director, using her experience as a working mother to understand exactly what families need to support their gifted children. Marcus, now 13, continues to create art that challenges viewers to see the world differently. His work hangs in museums around the world, but he hasn't forgotten the lesson that started it all. Every piece he creates asks the same question his first portrait posed: what do you see when you really look? The executives who witnessed Marcus's talent that day still meet regularly, but their conversations have changed. Instead of discussing only profits and market shares, they talk about the young people they're mentoring, the communities they're supporting, and the opportunities they're creating. They learned that day that genius can appear in the most unexpected places, wearing the most humble clothes, carried in the hands of a child whose mother cleans offices. But most importantly, they learned that recognizing talent is less about intelligence and more about humility, the willingness to see beyond our preconceptions and acknowledge greatness wherever it appears. The portrait Marcus drew that day still hangs in Richard's office, not as decoration, but as a daily reminder that every person we encounter carries gifts we might not recognize, stories we haven't heard, and the potential to teach us something profound about ourselves and the world. Sometimes the greatest art doesn't just show us what we're looking at. Sometimes it shows us who we really are. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, it shows us who we could become. The pencil in the child's hand had revealed more than just artistic talent that day. It had revealed the truth about human nature, the power of recognition, and the possibility of transformation. In the end, Marcus didn't just draw a portrait of Richard Coleman. He drew a blueprint for redemption. And that, perhaps, is the greatest masterpiece of all. If this story of unexpected talent and human transformation moved you, remember that genius exists in every community, waiting to be recognized. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to look beyond the surface and see the extraordinary potential that lies within.